Well, no, the culture is basically women wearing headscarves. That is the culture in Afghanistan.
I
So
think
you can't
that their
respect the culture,
culture,
which
I
is their
think they're,
beliefs, and then change the culture, which is their beliefs.
I would like to believe that the culture in Afghanistan is much more rich than just being boiled down to the woman wearing head coverings. As a woman, I think even if I were a foreigner, even if you say that people might look at me differently, they clearly didn't look at you differently. Some of them thought you were a local, right? So we don't know that for
Yeah,
sure,
if you
especially
wear
knowing it's a very, excuse me, I'm not finished talking, okay? Well, especially knowing that it's a very mixed country. We know that it's a very tribalistic country. We know that there are a bunch of different ethnic groups in there. You're cringe. Yes, you are. Thank you for holding up the sign for everybody to realize what you are.
We have the wonderful Stardust joining Break the Rules once again. Stardust, it's always a pleasure to have you on. How are you? How's that whole kerfuffle with, what's her name, Kuffles? The Kuffles
You
thing
had a
going?
kerfuffle with Keffels? Be careful with that kerfuffle.
It's going okay. I'm in
going
the
okay, the
process
kerfuffle
of getting
with Keffels?
canceled 30 different ways, so we'll see how it goes, I guess. Yeah.
The original inspiration for me to bring you on was a video you did about Lord Miles here in the flesh. So I'm curious, first off, what kind of questions you would have for Lord Miles, and then I want to reach back to the conversation I had with him. I don't know if you were watching before about the immigration. Curious what you think of that. So anyway, Stardust, go for it. Let Lord Miles know.
I guess first question I have for you is, do you have a death wish?
Huh? Maybe, I don't know. If I would go to Dangerous Nations. I don't know. I think I'd like to dance on the line a little bit. I honestly find it fun. I think I'd feel a little bit too bored if I didn't.
Okay. All right. What originally inspired you to go there in the first place?
So you mean in August, when the Taliban took over?
Yeah. Yeah. What
Yeah,
inspired
so
you to go
this
there in
was
the
the
first
height of
place?
COVID,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, so it was the height of COVID. You needed a vaccine to go anywhere. I wasn't going to get it. It still happens. I found a way around it. But at the time, you needed a vaccine to go anywhere. The only place you didn't need one was Afghanistan. And I watched a few videos from YouTube on Afghanistan. And I was like, it's pretty peaceful in central Kabul on the outskirts. Should be fine at the moment. And I was looking at online. Every single security analyst said it was fine. The US, UK, NATO governments, all saying it's okay. Even the people on the ground, the tour guide I spoke to said, yeah, it's fine. So did the embassy. So I thought before I graduate and work a really tiring, modern job, I'm just going to go on a little wacky adventure. So I felt like a calling for it almost.
Okay, so you did like a Dora the Explorer, but with like the Taliban, basically. So you were
Yeah,
talking
no
about.
monkey. Yeah.
He had a map. He had a map, Stardust.
Nice.
He'd go
So
anywhere.
you talked
Yeah.
about how a lot of
Instant.
the people there are similar to people in the West, like how the young men there are similar in a lot of ways to the young men in the West. Did you have any interactions with any of the women there?
Yeah, quite a bit. So I spoke to them in private. A lot of them were just chilling on the streets, selling stuff sometimes. I asked their husbands. They said, yeah, they could speak, blah, 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 so on. I asked them a few questions. They said it was quite good. They said some good things regarding the situation. Some expressed concern, some just didn't want to speak too much about it. But overall, mixed sentiment.
Okay. So has your trip there kind of influenced how you view like international intervention, things like that, and how has it how's your experience there also like influenced your views regarding like women's rights in like third world nations and things like that?
Yeah, so I do really like Afghanistan. That's why I'm going back in about 2 months. I'm going to the embassy tomorrow as well to get another visa. So it's a loaded question. I would say it hasn't changed my views too much because I understand it's a very strict Muslim nation. I do understand it's not going to be very liberal in its stances towards women. and I'm just gonna go along with it, even though obviously I don't agree with Muslims, and I'm very Catholic about things. If I could change it with snap of fingers, I would, but it's not my world, and maybe I can help some people in smaller ways. But if I start speaking out against it massively, it's not going to help anyone at the end of the day. Um, International relations, I think it's a bit too complex. It's beyond me. People have studied it for 40 something years and still get it wrong. Hence, the analysts be wrong about the invasion of Kabul and so on. So, I have my own personal opinions, and it has formed a little bit, and some of them are conflicting because different situations and so on. But generally, yes, opinions do sway a little bit.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard about the Taliban ordering women to wear head-to-toe clothing in public, right?
Oh yeah, that definitely does not happen.
Yeah.
When I was there, when they ordered that, people were just walking around. I saw several women with their hair fully out, and they weren't young ones, 9 years old or so. They were teenage age, sometimes early 20s, and so on. You saw some of the northern provinces, people, Tajiks and everything. They had their hair out. A lot of them just had normal burqas on, normal headscarves.
Well, it looks like
None
this
of the
was
crazy things.
it looks like this was just announced like May 7th that
Oh yeah, I
they're
was still there.
requiring. Yeah. Oh, you were still there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think it will change when you visit again?
Only one way to find out. I think it'll
I
be a little bit
guess.
stricter. There's
Yeah.
some things too that it's like the Taliban haven't spoken out against wearing jeans, but no one dares to out of fear that they'll get in trouble, even though jeans are fully allowed.
If you go there again and you see everybody now is actually covered from head to toe wearing face coverings, what would you think of that?
Yeah. Well, I think, kind of cringe. It's not Catholic, but at the same time, I got to respect it. It's their culture. It's how Muslims work. I can't suddenly start walking around, ripping out my hair, going, "Oh, bro, this is terrible, bro. Take it off. Take it off. You can't do this.
I bet people.
I can't start spouting."
I bet people would think it was weirder if they were dressed head to toe in fursuits, like full on mascot costumes everywhere they went. People would have a much stronger reaction.
Yeah, one day the furries are going to have a separatist colony. Yeah.
There are Muslim nations that don't require women to wear face coverings like that, right? There are Muslim nations that don't require women to cover head to toe. So the way that Taliban is doing it is different, right? They're significantly stricter with it. And I guess I would ask what are your personal opinions on that? What are your personal opinions on women being required to be covered?
Well, there is a good argument for it made by the Taliban and other Muslim countries as well. And you do have countries that are lukewarm towards certain religions and so on, such as the US. US Catholics basically being half pro-abortion, half not, with whichever way they feel on the day. Hence the outrage by some Catholics, where I think it was Nancy Pelosi, that's her name. She was banned from communion, but everyone's speaking out against it, even though they're meant to be Catholic. Same things are Muslims in some ways. There's a good argument that they should have head coverings if you reference all the literature. And I think there's a lot of people that are very well educated in Afghanistan, people that have multiple PhDs in the subjects in Islamic studies, and they are Western educated to some degree because of the exchange of information, and they still advocate for it. So I can understand the argument both ways. But at the same time, obviously, I'd be against it. But it's not my.
So I've talked to people who are educated in it as well, who have said that there's nothing in the Quran that says about the only thing that it says is that women should have clothing from head to toe, right? It doesn't say that they should need to cover their faces, that they should need to cover their hair, things like that, right? So I think it's a difference in interpretation, and there are other Muslim countries out there that don't require it, although there are women who still wear like the hijab in those countries. But I do think that there's plenty of contention even within the Islamic world about whether women should be required to cover their faces. So I guess you said if you could snap your fingers and change things, like you would. What kind of changes would you make if you were there? And you were
I don't want to go on
a
rant, but the entire world would be very Catholic. And if I could change anything,
about Afghanistan.
The entire country would be Catholic. Yeah, like with any country. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and everyone would be prosperous, and everyone have streets paved with gold
But
and
wouldn't
fences
that
and so
be?
on.
But
And
wouldn't that be
at the same
stepping? Okay.
But what
at the
about the
same time
woman?
too, you said you said it's not in the Quran, but at the same time, it's like a lot of things are not in the Bible, but you can extrapolate it from text and scholars and so on. And that's why some people dedicate 20 years of their life to try to understand some stuff.
Yeah.
And then you can say, well, I spoke to someone else who's educated on the matter and so on. But then, it's just kind of he say, she say against experts. So I can understand why an entire country of several million agree with a certain sentiment and several million disagree. But there is a basis of women should be covered in Muslim nations.
Right. If you had the ability to change that while you were there, or like snap your fingers and change that women were not required to do that, would you do that?
Yeah, like I said, it would all become Catholic.
Okay.
But just to step in here for a bit, Lord Miles, when you're talking about the women becoming Catholic, then that is kind of stepping on their culture. And that's the contradiction I pointed out before, that on one hand, you respect the kind of culture that they have, but at the same time, if given the chance, you wouldn't be opposed to kind of changing it. So it goes to this idea of how much influence should people have on cultures like this? Like, should we just leave it alone, let it do whatever they're doing? Or actually, if you see a better way out, step in there and figure out a better way that these people can live. So,
yeah, who among us is the one who's going to tell the Japanese not to be perverted with their cartoons and movies?
Exactly.
Like, their perversion is their culture.
When it comes to women's,
they're like 5'4", the Japanese are.
Okay, forget the Japanese. Forget the Japanese.
I don't care about cartoons. Yeah. When we're talking about half of the population, which is like women, right, or which are half of the population, I do care, and I do think, regardless of culture, people should be advancing the rights for women internationally. You can do that while still respecting cultures.
Well, no, the culture is basically women wearing headscarves. That is the culture in Afghanistan.
I think
so. You
that
can't respect
the
culture, which is their beliefs, and then change the culture, which is their beliefs.
I would like to believe that the culture in Afghanistan is much more rich than just being boiled down to the woman wearing head coverings. I think it's much more rich than that, and I think.
But we won't talk about all the culture. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, but we're talking about the headscarf, not the entire culture,
if half of the population is subjected to an unfair standard that the other half doesn't have to meet, then I think that there's an issue there.
It's not even just half of the population. It's also just to be clear, that
having the men dress up in the full burqas too. Everybody's always dressed up.
You know what?
Everybody
I might be okay with
covered.
That.
Yeah. No, but just to be clear though, wait, real quick, just to be clear though, when we're talking about Afghanistan, we're not talking about one group. We're talking about the Pashtuns. But other than the Pashtuns, there are other groups who dress in an entirely different way. Yeah. So, Lord Miles, you must have met some of them as well.
Not really a country. Yeah, Afghanistan's not really a country. It's just a giant tribal community that's been forced together through other countries being nearby, threatening to invade, so they had to kind of band together, on an easy peace, and now that's why there's conflicts after all the Americans have left. It's not really a peace-filled nation, unfortunately, but it's a very complex topic. At the same time, I would invite you to come with me. I'm going in about 1 month. I will help you get the visa if you want to go and spout against it. I'll also get the visa done for you the same night if you agree right now. You come to Afghanistan with or without me, and we can go to the Taliban and we can talk this through. If you believe so strongly in it, in women's rights.
Well, I'm just trying to understand. I don't think it would be safe for me to go there, but I would ask you.
But it's so important to believe in women's rights. You should, if it's really something you really stand for and something important, I would take the risk. It's your duty almost.
I agree with that, but I think there's also plenty of women's issues to be advanced even domestically and even in other countries. But what I would ask of you is, you're saying that you are into this, like you want hardcore Catholicism, but you don't want to touch other
Yeah,
cultures. So
thankfully, yeah.
would you say that your position is all cultural practices are equally valid?
No, of course not. Some cultures are very worse than others. Some are primitive and backwards and terrible for humanity.
AEW fans, got it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, some of Japanese. There's a subculture of basically fucking children. Excuse my language, but that's what it is. Would you say that's equal to, you know, I don't want to say Catholicism because I want to make the joke about the priests, but equal to, let's say, Christians in general. There's some cultures that are not good, like the tribes that eat people, cannibalism and so on.
Yeah.
And there's some tribes where they just make human sacrifices, and if you can agree that those aren't as good, you can extrapolate that for every other culture until you decide which cultures are the best.
It's controversial take saying that eating people and human sacrifice is wrong. Like that's their culture, pal.
I think you can respect other
the US
cultures,
elite.
but there's still certain cultural practices that we can acknowledge are not valid, right? That are no longer valid.
But that's not respecting them. But that's not respecting them.
I think it is. I
that's
think
not respecting cultures.
If there is a practice within that culture, that's.
I want to make sure you guys don't speak over each other. Yeah. So, Miles, you go and then start.
Sorry, there's a delay here. There's a delay here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Go on. Yeah.
So, if you respect a culture, alter it to some degree to meet your own. So, for example, I'm not going to walk up to the tribe that eats one out every 4 children because it makes them stronger and go, you know what? I respect your culture. It's it's your thing. You're eating innocent children, but you do you, because everyone must be accepted and must be all equal. But you do you, and then I'll say I disagree with it, but I'm not going to do anything about it. No, even though I see it as completely evil and backwards, I'm just going to sit here and whine. But you do you. I respect it, but I don't like it. But I'm not going to do anything about it. It's kind of passive almost. Like if I don't like something, I will be actively against it in my words and also in my actions to some degree. As much as I can do, where I don't get executed, which I've presented a lot in my history. But you can't talk about something and actually not do something about it.
Sure. So, like for example, like one cultural practice that I think is not valid is like FGM, right? And I think that female genital mutilation, and yeah, some cultures still practice that, but I don't think it's valid. They can practice other parts of their culture, but I don't think that part of that culture is valid by any means. And I think it should only be like people should just be advocating that that's something that people shouldn't practice anymore. Just like I don't know. I personally am. I don't have a problem with like a hijab, like a head covering. But like when it is putting this barrier over a woman's face, I can't look at that and not find it inherently oppressive.
Yeah, I think the same with face masks. But I would say you can't pick and choose what you want in a culture. Same with religion. If you believe in God, you will not pick and choose what you read and believe in and practice. You won't say, well, XYZ, I won't do this, but I feel like this. You kind of have to stick to the entire thing. And if you
I disagree with that.
That is way wrong, pal. You don't know Christians in America, brother. There's a lot of them
I know what you mean.
Choose. Listen, man, I know guys that eat shrimp every day, every Wednesday on Senior Day. They go and eat their shrimp and laugh about it and never even consider that eating shellfish is against the holy word of God. How dare they?
Oh, thankfully that's the Old Testament, so it's no longer valid.
But if a religion does include a human sacrifice or eating kids, like we talked about before, you would say objectively that is wrong. Why not apply the same thing to women covering their bodies fully with this outfit?
Oh, I agree, but then again, what are you going to do about it, truthfully?
All right,
I mean,
Stardust. What are you gonna do about it?
What are you gonna do about it, Stardust? How do we stop it?
I don't know. I'm just
canings?
asking.
Can we do some canings? I feel
canings?
like we can.
I think they already do that. I think
solve
they
our
already do
problems
that.
with caning.
Yeah. No, but see, this
one
is
thing I'll say about their culture that I really like is that they'll cane somebody to help teach them not to do wrong.
I do have a fundamental disagreement, though. I don't think that to respect a culture, you need to adopt every single practice within it. You can respect every part of a culture except for the one practice that you find abhorrent, right? And that doesn't mean that you're throwing out the entire thing. It means we've moved past the point. We have like advanced and realized that this practice is no longer something that we should be doing, and we can move past it, right?
No, I feel like, yeah, I feel like if you basically had control over, let's say you were president of Afghanistan somehow, whatever, and you just straight out say, yeah, no more face coverings, but everything else is cool. They're gonna stone you in the streets. They're gonna drag you out. They're not gonna accept that ever. So you can say, oh, peace and love, just one small aspect of your culture. They're not gonna have it. So they're gonna be ripping you apart.
Unless you become an iron-fisted dictator, like unless you become an iron-fisted dictator like Muammar Gaddafi. If you get enough power that you keep people in line, that's what I've noticed, like with Saddam's Iraq, places like that, where people were able to, like women were able to have more leeway as far as how they're able to dress. A lot of the more Bronze Age stuff was kind of thrown under. And I think the only way to maintain something like that in a population where the majority may actually be in favor of this very tyrannical rule over women would be through having an iron-fisted dictator. And I'm not saying that's great, but I'm just seeing like what are the alternatives here if we want to maintain this kind of society. Like even Iran, under the pre-revolutionary system, women can wear whatever they wanted, but there was also a secret police, there was a dictator, there was all that stuff. And maybe I think given a few years, both for Afghanistan or for Iran, if they wouldn't have gotten rid of the Shah, maybe there would have been enough education that there would be a majority of people that would have been all for that, and we wouldn't have the situation we have today. But that takes time. It doesn't just happen like that. But I don't know. That's at least how I look at it. I don't know, Stardust, what do you think?
Maybe. I don't know. I think the example of female genital mutilation is like a great example, right? Like I can respect the culture in which that comes from, but I don't respect that one practice. And just because it's from a culture that I'm not a part of doesn't mean I'm going to throw my hands up and say, well, it's their culture, and you know what, I'm not going to say anything about it because I don't want to impose anything on their culture, and I don't want to make I'm not, that's me not being accepting of a culture, right?
No, but I think Miles is coming from more of a perspective of not that this is good or bad, but more of what are the practical solutions here. Because even if he agrees with you, okay, now what? How do we actually go about changing this? I'm saying the only way to do it is with an iron-fisted dictator in a lot of these regions, and no other way, or just having some kind of a forever American Western presence like the old British Empire. They ended up getting rid of the burning of the widows. That's one example. So I think just like having some kind of a system like that is the only way to guarantee
sometimes equality does take enforcement.
Canings. I'm glad we all agree that I'm right about these canings. We can just
we didn't even get to the
I'm not trying to be difficult here, I'm just asking, so yeah.
But I don't know, like Lord Miles, do you agree then? Yeah. Go on.
Sorry, do I agree with? Well, yeah, obviously, I'm on the side that I want everyone to, be walking around freely, and I want a nice, happy Catholic or Christian society where, everyone has some liberty, but it's not degeneracy. I think that's some sort of Catholicism quite a bit, if you look at it fundamentally. But, if we just whine about it on Twitter or social media or wherever, it's not making a solution, it's just bitching basically constantly, unless if you act against it. Like for example, the Ukraine situation, most people are just saying, oh bro, Ukraine seems really bad, bro, I'm gonna put an emoji in my Twitter bio and that's gonna make a difference. It did make no difference, so I just went there myself, bought a car, drove the front lines and drove some people out. And most people who didn't like didn't like what was going on in Ukraine, got mad because they realized their actions had no influence. So if you really want to do something in Afghanistan, it'll be difficult and most likely you would die. But honestly, raising an army, overthrowing a country, doing some dodgy stuff, you could really make a difference that way. Like that's why the U.S. Constitution is written up. If you want to overthrow a dictatorship, a tyrannical government, or some really backward system, you honestly could. Same with South Sudan. I estimated you'd only need about £5 million to overthrow the entire country and take it for yourself. You could do that if you really wanted, if you disagreed with the country that much. But unless if we take action, there's nothing really happening.
I think advocacy
and I don't think
means something, right?
It just feels like we're just jerking off our own morals constantly. Like, I agree
I
on
don't
this and
think
I'll do
so.
this, but I'm
I think
particularly actually.
I think vocally disagreeing is some type of pushback. I don't think that's completely useless. I think it's spreading of an idea, the planting of a seed can be a huge impact on people.
I mean, until the ideas are caned out of people, they're just going to always.
You're really
be
going
there.
back to the caning thing, huh? You really like that one.
I'm going all in on caning. I am. You can consider me Kane today. I am Mr. Kane.
Wait until we get to the abling. But
that's right.
But anyway, Stardust, if you were, we were talking before, like if Lord Miles was in charge, what if you were in charge? Not so much of Afghanistan proper, but in charge of more, like going up the ranks of Biden's or Trump's or whoever's administration, and you were in charge of the policy that would be set there. What were some of the...
what's Queen Stardust do?
Queen Stardust, okay. I think there needs to be a universal option for healthcare at the very least. So some sort of universal option for healthcare. That just seems like a very basic thing that generally is accepted even among healthcare professionals. It should be a thing. So that's something that I would care a lot about. As far as other stuff, I think there are some things we could do with zoning and housing to create more housing units for people and bring down prices.
So you're a YIMBYist.
You want people to live in the pods?
Yeah.
You want to eat the bugs?
No, but I meant less domestic policy. I meant less domestic policy though, and more foreign policy. Because if we're sticking, no, hold on. Just to make sure, I'm not talking about general foreign policy. The subject has been right now the situations in the third world countries like Afghanistan, as far as women's rights, things like that. So if you were in charge of that whole thing, what would be your approach? Because Miles' approach, from what I understand, is either conquer them to establish a Catholic society or do nothing. So what would your approach be as far as dealing with countries like Afghanistan?
So we already do a thing with for example, indentured servitude and things like that. Not indentured servitude. I'm trying to remember the name for it. But basically slave labor. We do this with slave labor where we will subsidize countries. We will buy from countries and from specific industries within those countries that we know are not using slave labor. And then we will pay good rates for it versus if we know that there's an industry within a country that is exploiting slave labor, we'll often stop buying from that country, and we'll or not from that country specifically, but from that specific group within that country in that industry, right? Because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're not completely destroying an industry within a country. So I think that you can do similar things with rewarding good practices, rewarding equality for women or striving towards equality for women, right? Buying from countries, industries within countries that we know are employing women and giving them a fair wage. Rewarding countries that are making advances in women's rights with funding. We already do these kinds of things. I think that that's generally a pretty good practice.
I got to step in here 1 second and ask you about Saudi Arabia. So as you know, the U.S. is Saudi Arabia's second largest trading partner, and we've been very tight, yet they have this policy which doesn't really get addressed, where they have these guest workers who come in from Southeast Asia, they get their visas taken away, and from what I heard, they're treated like absolute crap. They're treated like slaves. We don't do anything about it, so it's almost kind of like we're not addressing what is one of our closest partners.
We should be addressing that. Yeah, we should be addressing that. We do it in other countries where we'll buy from specific industries that we know are employing people fairly. I think we should be doing that with Saudi Arabia too.
I'm not saying that's nothing, but it's in comparison to what's going on with Afghanistan. Afghanistan may be one of those more autarky type countries where they would have a little help from China maybe, or from other countries that want to deal with the Taliban. So, I'm not saying it's nothing to do a strategy like that, but I'm not really seeing it affect a country like Afghanistan that much. See, he's holding up the Taliban flag right now, in case you're wondering what that was.
What the? Wow.
I think so.
But yeah.
I think when it comes to that, where was I? I was going to say something, but I forgot.
You had brought up RoboCop.
I did not bring up RoboCop.
Well, okay. What are we
about to mention? WWE, Saudi Arabia show.
What is going to be the highest level thing of the United States could do to change things there? Because we're out of there. I guess the question is, should our policy be going into countries when we can, setting up some kind of world police situation like the British Empire of old used to do? Like, I'm talking like broad strokes here, because these things, they may have a certain effect, but it's a very small piecemeal effect, especially for Afghanistan. I don't really see, especially with China, that it's going to affect it at all, but I don't know.
So I think it's we are things we already do, like I said, like countries that abide by our values, we invest in them, we give them aid, things like that. As far as Afghanistan and other countries aiding them, I feel like that's very hard. As Miles correctly said, that it is a very tribalistic country, right? So it is. I don't even know if the one question I would have actually is if the leadership, do you think the leadership there represents the population well, right? So it's really going to come down, I'm not really into going in somewhere by force and establishing a police necessarily. I do think that positive rewards for good behavior are always a good idea. It seems like a way, change comes gradually, basically. So when it comes to phasing out slave labor, right? The reason why we don't pull out entirely of a country when they're using slave labor, and we instead maybe shift where we're buying from within that country, is because we don't want to completely collapse that country, right? We don't want to completely collapse an industry within that country. So what you do is you shift who you're buying from, right? You reward the people who are abiding by your values, and you don't reward the people who are using slave labor. It's essentially the same kind of stuff, right?
Well, Miles, what do you think? Do you think that this could be a direction we could go on?
Yeah, you know what? I think we can come together and say slavery bad. Very true. I think I wouldn't buy from some slaves or do any business with slave owners. There goes my sweatshop in Afghanistan idea, but okay. I guess we can put economic pressure on some countries, but then it's a slippery slope where we do invest in some countries because they don't have pee-pee, poo-poo, butt sex rights or stuff like that. So
I think on the very base,
it's a slippery slope.
I guess on a very base level, though, it does take time to phase things out, and slavery is not something that's cut and dry. A lot of people end up in forced labor, without realizing that they're quite literally slaves. So I think it's something that you phase out slowly, but I think you need to actually focus on basic rights, right? The most basic level rights. And if people are being forced into labor and they feel like they're bound by contract to continue providing labor for an exorbitantly cheap price and working terrible hours. Yeah, we need to do something about that, right? Just like we need to do things about women's rights. And if a country makes good strides in women's rights, we should reward them for that. We're like daddy of the world.
Yeah, that's good to know. Great, I feel. I think we should just go into countries and then just colonize them and build, McDonald's is everywhere. I think that'll solve a lot of issues, to be fair. But, yeah. I think we should basically just take over some countries, install a good moral framework, 50 years, and then there'll be a minority resistance group, and then we just influence them massively. Yeah, they have a better off life. It's a hard learning curve, and that'll be good. So I feel like it's like North Korea, I mean, are our sanctions working? Same with other countries too. Are our sanctions going to destroy them, or is it going to make them more radical in their direction because we're making them starve and making them extremely poor? I think if we...
So you'd rather invade North Korea? That would be a better...
Well, not exactly North Korea. Well, I have a way, we can do the money bomb with North Korea. We send over, we send over, say, a few planes over North Korea at night, drop loads of money, cause hyperinflation, cause them to have to adopt the US dollar, open up the international trade, and so on. But, I won't go there. That's probably another plan in the CIA banks that I'm not authorized to look at.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like spy talk.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think they'll take kindly to Keynes either, but it should be good. But I honestly think...
carry a big stick. That's a good diplomatic policy.
Yeah, maybe the U.S.
Be nice until it's time not to be nice.
I think the U.S. may have gone a little bit away from there. For example, with the Iraq War, I think some of the neocon people, even if you say, they may have wanted things to be, one way, they may have been corrupt bastards, however you look at it. But there were reports going around, like there are genuine feelings that, for example, Condoleezza Rice, she wrote about how she believed that the Iraqi people will now embrace democracy and all that. And you ended up seeing what exactly ended up going down there. So it's not that the people there in Iraq in the future, maybe with enough education, with enough emphasis on developing a different culture there, not to say that something like that wouldn't happen, but I think there are steps, and some people may not be, as like an entire population, they may not be ready. They end up voting in some kind of a tyrannical warlord that's favorable to their tribe, as opposed to the tribe that was, there earlier. And that's been the history, I think, of a lot of these conflicts, unfortunately, where America's gone in there, and it did not act like the British Empire. It did not act like, okay, we're coming in here, we're running things, if you don't like it, you can kiss our ass. So maybe, I don't know, it's weird because a lot of people are very anti-imperial. But if go on.
Well, that's why I'm not really that's why I don't really think that forced change really works, right? I think you have to make incremental steps, and I think again subsidizing people, subsidizing industries, rewarding good behavior from certain countries. I think that's a great way to implement incremental changes over time. Forcing a huge cultural change is never going to work. It's just like too much of a shock for people. People are very ingrained in their stuff, But like when it comes to specific practices within cultures, like we'll start giving more aid to this one area if they stop doing this one thing that we find, really, really bad for people, right?
I can counter this, though, because if you look at Japan and South Korea...
Yeah, I can counter it.
Okay, Miles, you counter it, and I'll counter it afterwards. Counter it. Go on.
Yeah, let's say there's a group that makes up 10% of a population, and they're basically like ISIS 2.0. They're terrible. Then you've got all the nice women and children who are totally innocent on this, and they're barely scraping by. Boom, US sanction because we don't reward this behavior. We're like a narcissistic leader of the world, and then boom, most of them just starve. But we have to restrict. We have to restrict them. We have to punish them, and then boom, they become more radicalized. And then the other group go, oh, wow, well, we have extremists. They're right. They're destroying our livelihoods. We might as well become radicalized and get even worse. I mean, create a terrorist attack. That's usually what happens anyway. If you really force someone into a corner, they kind of fight back.
Yeah, sure. I see that, and that's why you don't pull out completely out of a country, right? When you want to punish an industry for having bad practices, you punish that industry where people are doing those bad practices, and you try to find people within that same country who are not doing these bad practices, right? Just like if you find like an area. For what? Sorry.
You should apply for the CIA. That's exactly what they do. They fund militias that overthrow governments and certain institutions they see as right. Actually, wait, what if we turn it the opposite way round and let's say North Korea somehow becomes, the most powerful nation in the world, and they deem what they do is correct? Would you be okay with them exporting your ideas on you and then taking away your internet access and free running water and so on, and infrastructure, because you don't agree with their stuff?
So what I'm talking about is, like, for example, the brick industry in India, right? Like, if we look at the brick industry within India, you can take away funding, you can take away people buying from that brick industry if they're using slave labor, and you can buy from a different brick creator or supplier within India that doesn't use that slave labor. It's similar to that. You're not destroying the entirety of a country's economy. You're taking the investment from one area and you're putting it in another.
Well, these are monetary incentives.
I know that hasn't worked out but that hasn't worked out for, say, North Korea and everything like that. North Korea,
I don't really know.
Wait.
Sorry.
Wait. How would you resolve it for a dictatorship? Because they control every aspect of the country, so you can't really invest in different groups at slightly different, because you would be investing in the government anyway. I mean, how can you invest in Laos, North Korea, Iraq, Libya,
right?
Iran,
I think you can invest. I think you can invest when they make strides in certain aspects and incremental strides, right? Like, again, we're not forcing an overnight change. But as far as dictators go, I don't know. It's more complicated with that, right? If a dictator decides that they just don't want to comply in any sort of way, then they're just not going to, right? So it's more complicated then. But at least within, like, working with other democratic nations or semi-democratic nations, you can at least pull out from certain areas and put more into others. So.
There was an example I wanted to bring of Japan and South Korea. So after World War II, the United States not only invested money in these areas, but they also invested a lot of manpower, where people had to go there. They had to teach a lot of things to these places. Not to say that they didn't know how to handle things without them, but I think that initial devotion of time and resources towards that place, it made these countries very different. And I think that there is something to the idea that there was a Japan pre-World War II and during World War II, and then there was a different Japan afterwards. I mean, sure, you could say, like, the bombs had something to do with it and all the violence, but I still think that there was this aspect of the U.S. Army being physically present there for a long time and running things to a certain extent that I think did have a positive outcome as far as how these countries are today. So the reason I mentioned that is, sure, like the investments you're talking about, Stardust, I think that's important, but I'm not sure if these investments are playing as much of a role on, like, the root cause, which I think goes back to how the families raise their kids, as well as how are the kids, what environment are they exposed to in school? What environment are they exposed to in their social groups? That also takes time, but I think that there should be a very serious effort, if you're going to do it at all, to target those particular areas if you want there to be a change. And I think that goes beyond just a question of money.
Sure. I would ask then, like, how much of a change from the culture, from the home culture, was it that they were imposing through that force, right? Like, if it's a drastic change, it obviously is something that's not going to work. But if there's a way that they're meeting them middle way, right, or helping them incrementally change, then I can see that working. Sure.
Well, during World War II, Japan was... Yeah, go on.
I think that's a slippery slope. I think they would recognize that, they're trying to make incremental changes. And if it's something they very much believe in, like religion, they're not going to budge one bit. And I don't blame them. If someone told me, well, Miles, you can go to church, but only, you can't take communion, or let's say communion's limited, or some very small change, I'm going to flip out and I'm going to...
Yeah, you can't
I wouldn't say
boil a
Ted
frog
but,
all at once. You have to slowly turn the heat up.
No, well, Lord Miles says that they'll recognize it.
I think they still go revolt.
Yeah,
they still go revolt.
Some people will recognize it. Some people will recognize it, but
you're trying to indoctrinate
that's
people.
That's why you do these things slowly, right? And it's not overnight, and it's not like it's an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in 20 years it didn't happen in Afghanistan. They're just as bad as ever. 20, 30 years of invasion. We're thinking, if we want to change the entire society, hundreds of years. And then even then, the things we're trying to influence on them won't be present in 100 years anyway. We're always going to be far behind.
Well, what about Britain? What about Britain and India then? If you use that as an example of, we saw that there were improvements as far as the water, the railways, things like that.
We can even look even more recently, again, like the brick industry, right? India has been making strides in labor, right? As far as these people who are kind of in this contracted labor where they're quite literally slaves without realizing it, they are making strides in that. There's still a lot of it going on, but they have been working on it, and I think economic incentives do work in that way. And if it's like incremental changes, again, I do think it works. It's not something that's going to be easy at any point.
So I was talking before with Lord Miles, where my idea of how we can solve this left-right divide I don't even know what the hell to call it. My idea is that immigration should be based on, do you want the people to immigrate who would be closer to how you prefer to live, as far as how you raise your kids, what kind of values you instill in your kids, whether you would want your kids to hang around with their kids. So basically, being whatever we would consider to be, regardless of wherever you're from, being of a certain level of civilized. Again, we have to define it, like, what does it mean to be civilized, and so on and so forth. But again, it's like, I can imagine me hanging out with Mass Bastard, Stardust, Lord Miles, and we could all get along handsomely. So that's kind of what I mean, like having that level of understanding that they come from generally like the same kind of mindset. They could have different styles of food, they could have, whatever, but as long as like these particular things are taken care of, that I see as being something that could be focused more on when it comes to the kind of people that would want to emigrate to whichever country. Like, as long as they can vibe with the standards that we want to uphold, then that's fine. And again, I'm purposefully right now not getting into the nitty gritty of, well, how do you define that standard or this standard? I'm just painting
how do you keep people from lying? I could say anything.
Yes, I know. I'm painting a broad...
own Pepsi and Coca-Cola. I own both companies.
Yes, I'm painting a very broad picture here, and it's something for us to go into details with later on. But Miles, you have a different picture, so go on.
Yeah, I still think your picture is kind of, based, to be fair, better than most with what people say. And I've got to respect it. I didn't mention that earlier, but good stuff still. I feel like we shouldn't be talking more about immigration. I would just stop it mostly entirely. Cut it down 90%, let's say. And I would start deporting people who actually don't agree with the country's values, that are, acting like, a barrier to unity in the country. The good old American type of people. I feel like nowadays there's people that just want to break apart the nation, that do pose a threat to the actual sovereignty of, say, the US and the UK and so on. And, if they came here in the last 20 years or something, I don't see why they should stick around, truthfully. I mean, some people come here, like Stardust said, and they get universal health care, and my taxes go towards it. And then they moan and cry about the nation not being Muslim, let's say, or not being XYZ, when it's clearly not XYZ type of nation. It's our nation, and you have to adapt to it. We don't adapt to you, because you're coming here as a privilege to enjoy what we have, because we're letting you in so kindly. So I think these people shouldn't stick around.
All right, Stardust, go for it.
Yeah, I think that from everything that I've read, immigration seems to benefit us economically. It seems to benefit us in multiple ways. And I think as long as the people who come here are willing to like be part of the country and be part of America, then I'm fine with it. But I can't really speak to, I guess, the UK and the unique problems that they face there. Yeah.
Can you please define when you say being a part of? How do you define that?
Assimilating and being a working member of society, contributing to the economy, things like that.
At what levels would you say contributing to the economy? So, for example, one of the things that I was speaking to Lord Miles about was how if we have like a pyramid of jobs where we have like in the base certain jobs that could be done by people who are already, multitudes of people in the U.S. could do this, very, very easy jobs. And then you have, the smaller parts of the pyramid, more specialization, and so on. Just in terms of even just like practical nature, being able to take care of enough people, having a kind of system like you mentioned with the healthcare, where we can ensure that enough people are being able to be taken care of. Would you have any kind of limit when it comes to the kind of jobs that can already be done by multitudes of people who are already here?
Generally, we have immigration to kind of keep up with like the labor gaps that we have, right? And generally, like people are not keeping up with having children, right? Things like that. So immigration is good for us in that sense that we need to keep up the amount of the population that is younger, that is working, so that they can also take care of the older population. And so I think as long as somebody is working a job, I think that they're contributing to the society. I don't think it really matters if they are a skilled person or not, right? Because the same argument that you make for somebody who's unskilled coming in, you can make for somebody who is skilled coming in. So you could just say like, oh, well, there are plenty of people who are unskilled who need that job. There are plenty of people who are skilled who also need those jobs, right? But the fact is that there are still labor gaps. And so we need to be able to like fill those gaps.
Miles?
Very much disagree. I think that's very naive. I think that's what most libertarians feel like when they turn 18, They just like, oh, everyone comes together. The GDP matters, not everyone's quality of life, happiness, community, group identity. No, it's all about the GDP, bro. No. How about we just have more children? How about we repeal the birth pill for women? Because it's damaging for society on every single metric, apart from people that just want to sleep around because they're whores. Same with men too. I disagree with both men and women sleeping around. They should just not do that. Have some self-control. Have loads of children. Support those children. Feel happy in a society that is majority them. Because if you go into certain communities and you can't even recognize your own country, the immigration doesn't matter. I don't care what the numbers say on the screen. I would rather live in a slightly poorer nation that has everyone that's very similar in groups, ideals, understandings, and everything, rather than one that worries about GDP in the short term. Why do you think America is so fractured? Because too many ideas, too many conflicting beliefs are coming into one system. And now everyone feels alienated, regresses into their own community, becomes radicalized because they're being threatened in every single way, like every single group. And the whole mixing pot idea of America was invented by a Jewish man in 1911 during a newspaper publication where the general sentiment was never actually like that. That newspaper publication was ripped apart and laughed at. America was never a melting pot to some degree. It was laughed at and no one felt the same sentiments. And only now that's being pushed for mass immigration, where mass immigration does not help most of the time in the long run. It collapses nations, groups' identities. Most people feel depressed and sad, and that's why people feel terrible now. That's why suicide's extremely high. And that's why
so your main...
wait, before Stardust, sorry, before you reply, being a fellow member of the tribe myself, I gotta say something real quick about that. I know that there is a tendency on the internet today to always call out the Jays on certain things like that. What I would say, being a Jay myself and knowing many Jays who are absolutely not thrilled with what's been going on as far as immigration into both European places and the United States, where they would actually prefer to live in a place where people share the same kind of values that they originally came here and became citizens of the U.S. in order to uphold. That's why I want to make the distinction that when we're speaking of people who come from, the Pale of Settlement, settle into the United States, a lot of them who end up in cities, they are going to be very effective at adopting the milieu of the time. And in the 1930s, for example, a lot of that was Stalinism. The intellectuals used to consider socialists who were not Stalinists to be, as they called it, social fascists. Same thing in the turn of the century, or in the early 20th century, like in the 1920s, when you had anarchists, you had all kinds of people who are going to come from a Jewish extraction, who are going to be in the intellectual urban elite. They're going to get to the top of that, and they're going to be really good at what they do. And unfortunately, they're going to be leftists. That does not mean that you're going to have all the people who come from those areas, who come from those peoples, being leftists. I am not a leftist, and there are many people I know of the same ilk who are not leftists at all and don't care for it one bit. That's why I just want to say that when we're talking about these things, I don't personally like the, putting in together of things that, I think it's kind of like an old hat already. But anyway, that's just my spiel. I wanted to say that. Stardust, go for it.
Okay. I think it's interesting. That's an interesting. Okay. But anyways, so your main, Miles, your main problem with this is that you think that immigrants don't assimilate, basically, and that because they don't assimilate, it's like bad for
they
the.
Don't.
Okay. So there is a ton of research.
It's not my thing.
Okay, there's a ton of research that shows that immigrants are assimilating as well or better than previous immigrant groups, even Mexicans, within America at least. The National Academy of Science in September 2015, they titled the book, they published a book that says assimilation is never perfect and always takes time, but it's going very well. July 2015, there was a book that analyzed immigrants and second-generation integration on 27 measurable indicators across the OECD and EU countries. And the report finds more problems with immigrant assimilation in Europe, especially for those from outside of the EU, but the findings for the United States are quite positive. So that seems like it's more of like a failing of the EU that people aren't assimilating. Maybe the EU needs to do something there. And then through intermarriage in time, more educated descendants of Hispanic immigrants don't really identify as Hispanic. They end up identifying as white over time. So yeah, people do assimilate really well in America. Just the EU is not as good at it as us.
Well, I wouldn't say that's true. I mean, you're looking at studies that don't actually. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because I can pull up data that exactly says the other way. No, I can Google search things, but at the same time, you say, "Oh, I'm going to quantify this," like you're some sort of scientist. But like with my degree in physics, I've looked at quite a lot of data analysis myself, and one basic thing I found out is social sciences such as this have a huge degree in accuracy, and it's very, very. It's almost impossible to actually quantify it properly because it believes on metrics that are derived from things that are basically just assumed, which you can't do. That's why I believe 80% of social studies have non-replicable, have pieces of data that are not replicable. I can't say the word now. I need more water. But you can't replicate the data. At the same time, you can throw study after study, but most people are becoming more and more anti-immigration because the reason they don't want it. At the same time, they don't want more people coming to the country. And, people have the same complaints over and over again, where they don't want people that disagree with their ideals, disagree with their group identity, and go against their social interests. That's why most people are against immigration, against Mexicans, and so on in mass numbers. numbers, legally or illegally, and so on. And you agreed with me too. You also said, integration isn't perfect, but it's going well. Well, going well isn't good enough. I want 100% integration, because if you just take a small bit of differing bits when it comes to integration, if the ideals change just bit by bit, after 20, 30, 50 years, you have a whole different country of ideals that aren't on the line that they should be, where the country, when it remains the same people, it's just going to keep changing the country over and over again. They don't integrate properly. First generation immigrants never integrate properly, and it becomes a huge issue.
It's not
same
first
with
generation;
the EU,
it's second
same
and third.
with every other country.
But okay, so just because the UK and the EU are bad at helping people integrate into society, into their society, doesn't mean that America should be following what they're doing. America's clearly better at it. I'm sorry that you guys suck at it, but America, by all studies, shows that we're very good at helping people assimilate into our society. And this idea that our society is changing because of immigrants is just not true. It's just not true. People assimilate. People come over from these immigrants come in, and oftentimes they share a lot of the same ideals, because a lot of them are deeply devoutly Catholic or deeply devoutly Christian. A lot of them
WWF fans.
They have a lot of similarities with us.
Well, they have some similarities, but it doesn't mean they're the same. They may be Catholic, but they believe in certain ideals. The same country, America is not the same country it was in the 60s. You'd have the same people, same ideals, same economy, same
we are the best country.
No, it's gone worse.
We're better than we were in the 60s.
You think that because people are more depressed, people are more sad, more mass shootings, more suicides.
Women were fucking killing themselves at home in the 60s. Women were on barbiturates. Women were seeing psychiatrists because they were so depressed at home.
Supply your own country with immigrants that most people don't want.
I'm so sorry that the UK sucks at integrating people, that you guys put people in ghettos, but America's just better at it. I'm sorry. So
all right, I got
Stardust. I think the UK and Europe in general.
I got to throw something in here, okay? And I don't know if this is the fault of the school system or the fault of culture. I completely personally reject any talk about race or DNA or something like that, because I think that people are very flexible. Look at the North Koreans and South Koreans. People can change. It just depends on factors in time and so on and so forth. But if we're talking about
change into a werewolf,
exactly, or Goku changes into the Ozaru monkey. But anyway, if we're talking about another Dragon Ball reference, if we're talking about California, let's say, from what I understand, Stardust, you could correct me if I'm wrong. It's a very diverse place as far as there being a lot of people from Central America and South America who are and from Mexico, obviously, who are living in California. California has culturally, you could say, changed. Its education system has a lot of money that is pumped into it, but the results are not really there, from what I understand. Again, I could be wrong.
California funds more through taxes than all of the other states.
Yes, exactly.
So we fund. So I'm not in California, but California, as far as I can tell, they can do whatever they want because they fund more to the federal government than any other state. And there are tons of states that are being floated by California. So California can do whatever the hell they want. As far as it goes for me, California seems to be doing just fine, especially since they are floating so many different states in the United States. Especially even with their immigrant population, they are doing so great economically. They haven't changed their values. There's still American values. Sure, there are more Latin Americans there. There are more Spanish speakers there. That doesn't mean that their values have changed at all. They come to America and everybody's American and everybody believes in American values.
But let's stay focused here. Let's stay focused specifically on what are the education results. So tests are given, the kids do the tests come back. What are the education results right now of California? That, I think, is the key. Because look, a state can subsist on like the high-end technological industries there, but still, if we're talking about like the most vulnerable class, like the middle class, like people who need there to be a higher standard to reach towards, and I believe everybody is capable of reaching towards that standard. If that is not being done right now, then I think there may be a certain question of what are the kind of cultures.
There are other states to worry about. There are other states to worry about. West Virginia is like top on being least educated. Like least educated states are West Virginia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So I'm not too worried about California.
But that's,
California. California's
I
doing
would
pretty
bomb
good.
California.
Stardust
California's just
talking crap
sinking
about
with the
Yeah,
ocean.
because you're jealous.
Hellhole.
Because you're jealous that California is so fucking based and that UK can't keep up with one state in America. So sorry.
California's based.
I feel like West Virginia is
that's like
way
not
more
All of the
based than
movies you watch
California.
are from
no.
California.
West Virginia
Cry
will
more,
tell
cry more,
California
cope more.
exactly.
There's a problem that there's a problem that's going on here.
I'm in
So
DC.
okay, there's a problem that's going on here. So I understand you're talking about West Virginia sucking in terms of education. I don't want to go into whataboutism mode right now. I want to just stick right now to the education levels in California and look at
California has some of the highest like outcomes as far as education goes.
Okay, so specifically if we're talking about
high
like
school graduation rate is 83%. And a huge, like a third of their population gets a bachelor's degree or higher. So I think they're doing really well.
Interesting.
Well,
then I have to go.
College matters.
Then I have to go back and look at the statistics for later, because that is very different from what I saw earlier on. So again, no, this is a very important question because I
Some
could
of
be
the dumbest jabronis I know are college-educated people. They don't.
Well,
know
that's
shit.
a whole other thing.
That's a whole different. That's a whole different.
College
okay, let me see here.
They're
California.
retarded. They don't deserve to go to college education.
I don't know, dude.
All right,
I would not going to a war into a war.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Here we go. This is an important one. So it says over here, worldpopulationreview.com. California's 23.1% of adults lacking basic prose literacy skills make California have the lowest literacy rate of 76.9%. So the school system may have something to do with that. And I think that culture also has something to do with it as far as when you have people, let's say the Jews, for example, you have Jewish people who came from the Pale of Settlement, didn't speak a lick of English, yet they understood that it was very important, regardless of whether they were being discriminated against, to work very, very hard, work very, very smart. And if the hospital didn't want to admit Jewish doctors, you know what they did? They started their own hospital. So this is something that I think every person is capable of as far as, if we're talking about people from Mexico or wherever, but I don't see that being the focus. Instead, I see a lot of virtue signaling from people in California saying, oh, we love our immigrants so much, yet I don't really see that much of a focus on improving something like this literacy rate.
So they're probably working on it. I think probably a lot of it that has to do with it is if you have a lot of immigrants coming in, probably they're not coming in like super educated, right? At least if they're coming from like from across the border, right? So yeah, they have to make improvements in that case, certainly. But they still by far, despite that education issue, they still by far are doing the best economically.
All right, one more thing. One more thing. Results from the 2019 National Assessment of Educational Progress show that only 32% of fourth graders are reading proficiently. So these results put California below the national average and behind 25 other states. So again, you cannot attribute this to just the first-generation migrants who fled from wherever to come here. This is students who are part of the California school system. To me, this shows a complete lack of focus on having this very high standard that everybody should abide by. In New York, by the way, where I'm from, what that stupid fuck de Blasio decided to do, and I don't think it was passed, but what he wanted to do was he wanted to lower the literacy standards and lower the hard testing because the kids who were Black and Latino were not doing so hot. So he wanted to ruin things for the Asian kids and for the white kids just because they didn't, it wasn't equity. He wanted equity. My approach would be make it even harder and make sure that you're paying special attention to these kids in their communities to get them to that same level, which I believe is 100% possible, yet they don't want to focus on raising the bar. And that's what I think really sucks.
I think that, I think we can agree on raising the bar. But I think that, like looking at this one stat, when you've got the entirety of California that is like literally keeping other states afloat, I think that's not really like indicative of a problem with immigration, right? Maybe because California is one of the most
But that's like saying Saudi Aramco is keeping Saudi Arabia afloat when you have a bunch of really, really dumb people there that are rich off of oil. They're not the ones keeping it afloat. It's the oil and it's the industry. So that's a very different thing.
No, I mean, I think there are
people who are things about California.
They are paying taxes, and those taxes fund a lot of other states.
The productive people are, but we need to get more people on a higher level.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let's get more people on a higher level.
Are too.
Yeah, let's
no. Well, how
about the situation in California? What's going on with that? How come those people
homelessness is highest in the US and California. Most antidepressants used in California. California is also the most unhappy state, highest cost of living, highest housing prices, which you want to reduce, by the way, but California is so great. Basically California is the hellhole of America.
Biggest.
Doesn't mean a thing. If I'm a billionaire, but I'm living a miserable lifestyle because of the ethics and the soullessness of the country, I'd rather be poor, and I've chosen that time and time again. That's why I dropped out of investment banking. You see, I would rather live in, say, Texas, which is happier, and that's why everyone's moving out of California. That's why there's a huge exodus of the California population, and I don't care about GDP most of the time. It doesn't matter about money, and that's the one thing that ruins nations. This is basically the fall of Rome, just slowly happening in time, and that's why most people dislike California. It's a hellhole, and everyone in the US pretty much agrees with me. It's the most hated state in the country, but just because it has a few extra numbers, why don't we just I don't know, instead of basically paying the most money to the federal government, why don't we just reduce the government? We should go a little bit more libertarian on that.
Okay, so California has some of the best colleges in the United States. They have Stanford, they have Berkeley, they have UCLA, they have UCSD. So a lot of the issues that you're talking about with,
how are their football teams?
If you let me finish, a lot of the issues with the education in California is a budgetary issue. Right. So maybe they can put more money into the public school system. Sure. But as far as California itself having some of the best college institutions in the United States, let alone the world. Right. I think that you're just completely off base here. I mean, again, it's the fifth largest economy in the world, surpasses the UK. I'm sorry. It surpasses the UK.
But where's the place where the number one producing
Coke Carter, dude. Coke Carter.
There is a nice...
I'm going to move to California out of spite.
Oh, boy.
You should do it. I would love to see you do that. The first come to Afghanistan.
Enjoy the weather.
Yeah, no, the weather's nice.
I won't go to Afghanistan because I'm a woman, and I'm a brown woman, and I'll probably get fucking killed over there. So, no, I'm not going to go over to Afghanistan.
There is a nice...
I'm a white guy going to Afghanistan.
Okay, sure, but you're still a man. That's significantly better status than a woman.
I feel like the second I step off the plane, there'll be 5 guys walk up and try to fight me.
There is a nice analogy which I read in a book about Sweden. So Sweden used to have, when it had less taxation and less social programs, it used to be, I think, like the number one economically speaking country within that European sphere. And later on, once it introduced a lot of these welfare programs, it started going lower and lower and lower and lower. The reason why I'm talking about Sweden, and I think its economy was at its peak at around like the 50s or 40s, something like that. I think 50s. Anyway, the reason why I'm talking about it is I like the analogy that book offered where it compared it to having a rich son or daughter of, like some wealthy magnate. And the magnate passes away, and they leave all this bunch of money to this rich offspring, who then spends it nilly-willy. And you could say that before, when the magnate was alive, there was a lot of money, a lot of resources, and there was a lot of boastfulness going on, throwing on these tea parties and whatever, talking about how, we have so much money. Then take a couple of years after the magnate dies, and you have this rich asshole who's spending that money everywhere, and he says the same thing. Look how much money I have. Look how rich I have. Look how rich I am. But the question that book asks is, relative to what happened before, you're not that rich. You're still rich, like you look very rich, but you're spending this money in a very bad way that eventually you're going on the losing trajectory. That was the example they brought in relation to Sweden, which was once economically way above, and now it's going down.
I thought we weren't. So I'm not able to bring up other states in the United States, but you're bringing up an entirely different country.
Yes, but the reason why I'm bringing up is Yes, it's my show, but no. The reason why I'm bringing it up is just to give an example of breaking the rules. BreakTheRules.tv. Subscribe right now. Is just to show what happens when you're looking at the success of a country, but not looking at certain things that are in play right now, which may spell the end of that success in years to come. That is a very important thing to look at. And I would also bring up I believe an Arabian king said this. I don't remember his name. I can look it up. And I think he talked... Jeff, exactly. King Jeff. Hail King Jeff. Everybody who talked about how my grandfather rode a camel. My father rode, pick like some mid-sized car. I rode a Lamborghini. My son is going to ride a Lexus, and his son is going to ride a camel. I butchered the quote, but I think you kind of get what I'm talking about here. I don't think we should look at the economic situation and freeze it and pretend like there wasn't a before and there's not going to be an after. And it's very important. I don't think we should
be looking at quotes, though, like these quotes about riding a camel. Like, oh, my son's going to ride this, and then his son's going to ride a camel. Like, I don't think that's really even a reflection.
There's a lesson in it, though, I think.
No, I agree with camel guy. I agree with camels. No, if it's just anti what you're saying, I agree with camels. Like,
oh boy, no,
I think the lesson doesn't want to drive.
No, the important lesson here, I think, is we have to look at not the economic situation of any given country or state, but you have to look at what are the potential factors that may spell the downfall so that we can anticipate it instead of just being ignorant about it. So in terms of California, I'm not seeing great things with the educational system, and I'm also seeing people like Elon Musk, for example, Cal exit, going to Texas. A lot of companies are going to Texas right now. Texas is being very prosperous.
California taxes are very high, and because they're tired of funding the rest of the states.
And then what happens in a couple of years, maybe a decade? This is what I mean by looking forward in time.
Maybe the taxes in other states need to go up a little bit. Maybe they need to push their game a little bit as well.
Taxes need to go down. Let's just make everyone pay most of their money to the government, because the government has our best interests at heart. And if we just keep throwing money at them, they'll just look after us and pay for everything, like universal healthcare. Or just
California has kind of been floating a lot of these states. I'm just saying, so.
There's been a lot of
California's been exporting pretty much great Satan to every single country. Everyone hates California. Everyone in California is depressed, has issues, has economic issues, the highest homelessness, highest antidepressants, highest rates of depression, highest rates of...
Here's a really interesting stat for you. Here's a really interesting stat for you.
It has the most...
If Britain were a U.S. state,
about the two situations,
it would be the second poorest behind Alabama and before Mississippi.
You keep talking about money, but you don't address any other issues.
I'm just letting you know.
Bro, he's got loads of money, bro.
They would be the second poorest
state. It's like if you got a person and said, oh, bro, he's a millionaire, but he's a crack addict, he's homeless, he pretty much can't relate to his neighbor.
Yeah,
he can't afford a house.
Addict and the homeless guy.
Look at him. Wow.
England is literally the homeless crack addict.
No, you know what a good example would be, though? It wouldn't be England. It would be maybe even India. Or maybe it would be certain third world countries in Central America. Because what you have there is you have a low middle class. I've spoken to people who are from parts of Central and South America, and they say that their elite ends up going not into the businesses anymore, not into private corporations, but it ends up going into the civil service. Because what ended up happening was these countries have a very stratified class system, where on top they have the civil servants people, the people who run the government, and on the bottom they have all the people who dwell in the favelas. The middle class is nowhere to be found. That is a trajectory that I'm seeing in California right now, at least from what I'm able to see. The middle class is being squeezed out, and instead, yes, we have this very rich Elysium-style elite, who are in tech, but you're also having a lot of poor people.
So that's why we need to change these zoning restrictions and make housing more affordable, so more people in the middle class can afford to live in California. It'll be awesome.
I don't think they want to live in California.
They do want to live in California because the work is there, the jobs are there. The jobs are there, the work is there, the labor is there, and they can make a good living there if they had the affordable housing to do it.
With the most homeless people. Do you know why housing isn't affordable?
Because they don't have affordable housing there.
It's an investment.
You know, a lot of the times
you know why?
they'll
Because
get
it's
these
not.
homeless
It's an
people and they'll
investment.
put them on buses and send them to other cities. It's really funny.
Why don't they just go to Texas or Florida? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, they can
Why
go
would
to
they?
Because the work
California,
isn't there.
lucky
The
them.
work isn't nearly as much work there as there is in California.
So you're saying
there
they
is work in California?
There's tons of work in California. There's just not housing.
Wait, so as far as Texas and Florida goes, you're saying that there is far less work there in Texas and Florida than there is in California. But at the same time, you are noticing that more people are traveling there, more people are starting to see jobs there, and more
are traveling
and
there.
but more jobs are coming into these areas.
Sure.
So when more
Elon
jobs
is moving there because of taxes, and then he'll be bringing jobs to those places.
Yeah,
so that's great. That's great for those places.
Yeah, and that means that even though you're saying more people want to go to California, if this trend keeps going, if these places are the new boomtowns, wouldn't that mean that... Then we'll have to see. But again, it's like if these places become nice and prosperous, it almost seems, and again, I'm in New York, so I've only seen this from a New Yorker perspective, not from a Californian perspective. But from what I see, even when I look at the faces of these so-called leaders in California, of these bureaucrats, these are losers. These are just like absolute run-of-the-mill losers who have no business being in the position that they're in. And when I see these losers, I see decline.
You know, the highest rates for lifetime literal homelessness were found in the UK. 7.7% versus the United States. United States was 6.2%.
Exactly. We're too much like California. We're too much like California.
You're not like California at all. You're second. If you were a state in the United States, you would be the second poorest state. You are nowhere near California.
Wait. Start. To be fair to Lord Miles, there is this.
We've got universal healthcare.
Universal healthcare.
How's that? Yeah, you guys really manage it well, don't you?
Detailing out your details.
And you think America's going to manage ours?
Yeah, we pretty much made your entire.
We can do it better. We've done assimilation better, and we can do that better too.
I don't know.
Well, Miles' points is that
I might just be stirring shit here, but yeah.
I just printed off a letter I'm writing to the Taliban commandos when I meet them in 2 months. You're going to be banned from the country. You're never coming to Afghanistan.
Oh, if I can't say California, I was going to go there in the first place. You think that I was going to go there in the first place? Oh no, I can't go to Afghanistan now, guys. As a woman, as a brown Muslim woman. Yeah, I really want to go to Afghanistan. That's a place I want to go, where I have to fully cover my face.
Great. It's better than California. I'd rather be in Afghanistan than California,
as a man who doesn't have to cover himself.
Okay.
You're an infidel to them, just so you know.
I can't wear shorts. I do have
You're
to cover myself.
You're an infidel to them, just so you know.
No, Star. Actually, he's not an infidel. He's not an infidel. He would have to pay jizya. So if Lord Miles were to live there, he would have to pay, as a Christian, the jizya tax. So Jews and Christians have to pay,
But guess what? It's less tax than California.
Yeah, and California is better. California is better than Afghanistan too.
Excuse my language, but it's terrible.
It's a shit. You know what? Afghanistan, at least in California, I don't have to wear a full fucking cover over my face and over my entire body.
Yeah, you just have people showing half their asses up and then just.
Well, I don't have to do that. I'm not required by law to show half my ass.
California, there's still a lot of masks.
Well, I don't know. It seems like the cultural issues are a lot more. I don't like California, and I'd rather die before acknowledging California.
I think
the only thing I like about California
you're just mad because you're jealous. You wish you were California. You wish that
I'm not jealous.
That has no wars.
I am not jealous. I would not be jealous of what you claim to be and what California is. You're just jealous because you can't go to Afghanistan because you ran away from religion and became an atheist because you are godless.
I could say anything now.
The UK is jealous.
You don't even know me. I dislike the UK. I dislike the UK. I always have. I'm agreeing with you on the UK. You've got nothing on me.
Okay, all right.
Wait, everybody settle down.
You think you know what you're talking about.
Everybody settle down. Settle down. Hold on. I'm reining back the stream. I'm reining back the stream.
All right.
Raptors are cool.
Wait, okay. I'm reining back
for every American.
Here, hold on. I'm reining back the stream. I have not muted Mass Bastard because he is on his best behavior right now, but I've muted the two of you temporarily. So first I want to say, if you guys are enjoying this, please subscribe. Second of all, invest in Lev, hashtag invest in Lev. To Lord Miles' point, he is not a fan of England as it currently is, and so it goes back to my question about California. what are the things that have made England the kind of place that Lord Miles is not like? Can we extend that to what Lord Miles sees is going on in California? Lord Miles, you have the mic, and then I would love for Stardust to reply.
Mass immigration, unchecked economic advances, liberalism when we shouldn't influence in other countries. England's become too passive. I can go on a huge 1 hour rant about it, but I won't. It comes down to a ton of things. Where do I begin? Yeah, untapped immigration. Like some immigration, I would say, okay, a little bit, but no massive amounts. I can go in some areas of Birmingham where I would walk for 30 minutes and I would see no one but Muslims. It's become very fragmented as a country. There's no group identity anymore. There's no pride in the country. So people just kind of dowsy round going, oh, I'm just an individual. But no, individualism doesn't work most of the time. Group identity really does work well. And of course, you can go extreme on both sides, but I pick it in between. And England's got extreme on the individual side, which I just don't like. England could have been a great nation like it usually was with the empire. It ruled most of the world, including India, and they used to own the US at some point, but then it just kind of failed and fell apart. It could be great, but that's basically my point. It's following what California's done with trying to attempt universal healthcare. It's failed miserably. Everyone laughs at the NHS. Taxes have gone up considerably, like in California. No one likes it here. The rates of depression in the US, in the UK, have gone up massively with the trends I've described and the policies that have been adopted. Whilst all these poor countries are apparently just miserable, no, they're very happy. You see the poorest countries are actually extremely happy, and that's why you got Poland as well being the best of both worlds with minimal immigration but strong family values and a strong religion. I don't care if it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism to some degree, they're happy at the end of the day. And that's what Poland is. I think.
And one quick thing about Poland, by the way, it's one of my favorite countries too. One quick thing about Poland: they recently brought in a lot of Ukrainian refugees in there, but you know what? The refugees, they're absolutely dandy there. They integrate well. So anyway. But anyway, Stardust, I would love for you.
No, exactly. I mean, there's been loads of.
Okay, fine. You can pick. There are some certain things, but I'm talking broad strokes here. Broad strokes, there hasn't really been as much of a cultural clash. Culture-wise, there's not that much of a huge difference between the Ukrainians and the Polish.
I can understand because they're neighbors, but at the same time, when you bring people across half the world that haven't heard of most of their values, which they haven't, and then try and integrate them, disaster.
I think I could integrate very well into China. I think I could do it.
But not the Polish and Ukrainians. Again, Polish and Ukrainians, those are very close cultures. I mean, hell, certain parts of Ukraine were parts of Poland and vice versa for a long time. Yeah. So that's just like,
they were forced together. They were forced together, but then
I feel bad for insulting the UK now that I realize that Lord Miles doesn't like the UK. I was a little too hard on the UK. Look, America is a country much like the UK, very, very much founded on democracy, on freedom, maybe not the same levels. But in America, you can practice any religion that you want and nobody can stop you. As long as you are a valuer of freedom and of democracy and individuality, you are an American, and that is your group identity. It doesn't matter where you come from. America has blended the best of all cultures and exported them to every country in the world. America exports music and culture and movies more than any other country in the entire world does, because literally we are the best. We are the best mix of everything. Politics in America, when something happens, it shakes the entire world. We have the best military in the world. We are in 60 treaties with different countries to provide allyship to those countries. And the UK isn't that bad. The UK has a rich history of
imperialism.
Well, I mean, they have imperialism, but
colonialism,
immigration. Look, the UK. Look, he spoke uninterrupted. Can I speak uninterrupted?
Yes, go on.
Okay. All right. So the UK is it has its struggles, but they've successfully removed racism as a problem. It's so welcoming that it has the highest rates of KF. I think it's KF immigration anywhere in Europe around 18%. The NHS in the UK, while maybe is not up to par all the time, has saved millions of lives, and it's a country where basically everyone, regardless of background, has access to healthcare, university education, and basic services. The UK is beautiful for that. And you know what? America maybe can learn something from that. But America is still a country of freedom where you can practice whatever religion you want. You can say whatever you want. Nobody can change what you say in your head or what you say out loud.
Not yet. I feel like there's going to be some canings.
I mean, kind of can.
God damn it.
We export so much of our culture, man. People want to be us, okay?
Yeah, they want to be the face of America, but they don't want to be Californian. They want to be the good aspects, but you know, I like America. I like the American people.
You're jealous of California, and you're jealous of the UK because you didn't integrate into the UK.
All you can say is
California
has money. You're jealous of California.
You think that there is a problem with immigrants integrating into the UK? You're the one who's not integrating. You're the one who's not integrating. It's not their problem. It's you. You're having an issue with yourself.
No, it's their problem. They're guests in my place. They should integrate to my culture.
In your place.
Yeah, my country. I was born here. I
grew up
here.
Everybody else's problem except for you.
Wait, I feel like Wait, hold on, guys. I feel like we're playing roles right now, which has a tendency of happening where we go on streams. We assume certain assume certain characters.
The magic user.
I'm a fighter.
Instead, what I want to do right now is I want to pretend. I want to go like
I want to
go like full.
Fucking die.
Because you don't want to fight. Because you just talk.
Because I'm a woman. A brown Muslim woman,
Excuses. I'm a Catholic.
Excuses. So what? You're still a man. That is significantly more. Yeah. Gives you significantly more agency in that part of the world than I would.
I was wearing a cross around my neck. I had no issues.
Do you think that being a man is in any way being a Muslim comparable to being a Muslim woman in Afghanistan?
Yeah. I'm with Stardust on this one.
Walk around with a top hat and a cane, and nobody would mess with you.
Well, especially with
the
cane.
Cane's for.
Exactly. No, but I'm actually with Stardust on this one because you remember that whole controversy with Joe Rogan talking about the MMA fighter who was, like the man who was in the women's tournament, how he was kicking the ass of all the women there. And Joe pointed out that there is like bone structure differences and all that kind of stuff that's going on there. I think it applies to this question of going to such a place where Lord Miles, like let's just say what the deal here is. You being somebody who is, yes, you're Christian, but under their ancient system, if you were to have gone into the Ottoman Empire or somewhere in ancient Iraq, during the reign of the Muslims, you would have been, if you were to live there, you would have had to pay a jizya. But you wouldn't have been persecuted to the extent that somebody like Stardust would be. There is a difference there as far as how they would treat you.
Citizens.
Well, yeah, but that's Islam. Like, you have to follow the religion that the majority of the country's in, like the same culture. Like, if I went to
women are still secondary to men.
Well, let's break it down, though. So if Stardust were to go to Afghanistan, what would be certain things that she would not be able to do according to the fiqh, according to the law there? That's what they call it, yes. Fuck you. That Lord Miles would have been able to do. So if we could just break down legalistically speaking, like where would Stardust start to run into certain issues?
Would I be able to travel anywhere by myself? Would I be able to talk to anybody, any of the men there? Would I be able to...
when she steps off the plane, you have to instantly wrap up like a mummy.
Yeah, you actually could. Should I tell you why?
I'd have to cover from head to toe.
Wait, one at a time.
Who's an outsider? No, you wouldn't. Because so there's different laws for people who are residents, and people who are immigrants, and people who actually visit there as a tourist. As a tourist, I could basically go there and break the fast beforehand. I decided not to because I actually respect countries I go into and not try and, always change them. Sometimes though. But when I went there, I was given the option to break some rules because I was a guest there. So you could go in there with a basic headscarf and be absolutely fine. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can honestly you can bring a headscarf. You can walk around privately. Someone might go, "Hey, where's your husband?" We go, "Oh no, look, here's my passport. I'm a tourist," and they'll go, "Oh, fair enough."
Okay.
Honestly,
So,
I don't think you would have many issues going there, and I think that's a lot. Sorry, carry
okay.
on.
So again, as a woman who a brown woman who probably would blend in significantly there, right? It's not going to be that way for me. They're not going to assume that I am a foreign person there. If I am there, they are going to automatically assume what is she doing? Why does she not have the full covering? And are they going to even wait long enough for me to present my passport to them? Who knows? But we know that they're not going to immediately
Yeah.
identify me as a foreigner.
Here's where I would disagree,
Oh,
though.
I think they would, because you know
Yeah.
why?
Okay, go on. I think we
So,
may think the same
number
thing.
one, you can tell through different facial types and stuff like that. They would know you're an outsider.
Yes.
Because you don't look like the average Afghanistan woman, even without a face veil.
Yeah.
They would identify you as someone who's from a different region. Like with me as well, some of them actually thought I was a local because I was white, so I was from Tajikistan. They thought I was from the northern provinces, and some of them actually thought I was an outsider. But it was mixed basically. But most of them thought I was fine with the Taliban. And I did see some women around there walking around with headscarves off and having no issues and traveling freely with no issues. It's one of those strict laws that are sometimes enforced when it's needed in the country from their own perspective. But if you go there and if you just start speaking English and just show that your passport, you'll be absolutely fine. Like the issues I had, I can easily resolve it by showing my passport.
The very fact that you could go there and you said that you were taken as a local by some of them actually shows to me that maybe you had a little bit more going for you than you realize. So as a dude, right, a man in a country where men can do much more than women, you probably are able to do much more, right? As a woman, I think even if I were a foreigner, even if you say that people might look at me differently, they clearly didn't look at you differently. Some of them thought you were a local, right? So we don't know that for sure, especially knowing it's a very, excuse me, I'm not finished talking, okay? Well, especially knowing that it's a very mixed country. We know that it's a very tribalistic country. We know that there are a bunch of different ethnic groups in there. You're cringe. Yes, you are. Thank you for holding up the sign for everybody to realize what you are. Most people will not be able to tell that I'm whether I'm a local or not, right? If they thought he was a local, then that's clearly that's completely different, right? It doesn't matter if I'm a local or not. I'm still a woman. I'm still secondary to a man in status in that kind of social group or society, right? And who knows if they will wait long enough for me to even say a word or even to show my passport for me to be okay. Even despite that, there's still going to be significant barriers if they find out I'm a foreigner. There's still going to be significant barriers to me doing basic things as compared to a man who's traveling there.
If I could answer a bit...
No, not true. You haven't been there. I have. I know what I'm talking about.
Wait, hold on, Miles. If I could actually...
You're not a woman.
I wanted to quickly address what Lord Miles said about him recognizing Miles as being one of the people from a different area. If we're talking about the geography of, let's say, India, and then you have Pakistan, then you have Afghanistan, that is an interesting question of whether they would assume women who were, let's say, from Pakistan, which would be the closest place, since Stardust, like, you're originally from Pakistan in terms of ancestry, correct?
India.
Yes, India. Yeah, originally. And I think it's an interesting question of whether they would assume that somebody who would, let's say, be coming in from India would ever be able to just, like, naturally be part of the populace here as an Indian woman within Afghanistan. Something tells me not quite, and the reason why I say that is with Lord Miles, since geographically there may be certain tribal places where people do look like Lord Miles does, as far as, you know, being like white, European, stock, whatever you want to say. Like even the guy who runs Afghanistan, or ran Afghanistan, the president, I think he's not there anymore, former football player or soccer for the Americans.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah, and he looks so much like a weathered, you remember that, the mega church guy, Stardust, you know who I'm Mass Bastard, you know who I'm talking about.
The guy, Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen, yes. He looks like look him up, he looks like a weathered Joel Osteen, that guy. And I could see how somebody like Miles would be able to kind of blend in with some of those certain local tribes. But as far as an Indian woman being there, I think there may be some confusion there. You know what I mean? That's what I would at least give Miles here, that it would not make as much sense geographically.
There would still be confusion about me being there like there was, but they have no issues. You've just listened to the Western media. You haven't researched the country. You haven't actually been there like I have. And I'm the one that can actually speak on the topic, you know.
You're saying
that
like
Stardust.
the
She
sentiment
just
amongst
goes,
women.
Bro, I go
you
there.
yourself.
Wait. Okay, one at a time. Miles, then Stardust. Yeah. Miles, then Stardust. Yeah. Okay, go for it.
You've got this weird, magical, made-up fantasy where you'll go there and just instantly be oppressed, and you're the strong person who believes in Western values, and you'll stand up to them, but actually not go there, and so on. You'll go there, you'll have some funny looks, and then some people will try and speak to you. Maybe the Taliban will just talk to you and go, you know, what are you doing? You just tell you're a tourist. They'll actually invite you for food. I honestly think they would treat you very nicely. That's the issue I had. I eventually went there for a rescue mission to extract someone, but then I ended up having tea with the Taliban several times and getting gifts off them and so on, even when they didn't know I was a foreigner. It's bizarre, but it's a very nice country, and I honestly think you're judging it very poorly, and your understanding of it is very poor, which very much shows.
You yourself said earlier that the sentiment amongst women in that country about the changes that were taking place there were mixed, right? You yourself said that. You had to ask for permission from their husbands to speak to them. I think that's already two huge things that you wouldn't have to do in the West, right? Secondly, there are tons of statistics you can look at, the amount of violence that the average woman in Afghanistan has to deal with, right? In her lifetime, like 90% of women in Afghanistan have dealt with some sort of violence in their home. So no, I don't think that I don't think that what you're saying is accurate. You are seeing like the diminishing of their rights as we speak, right? As time goes on. Now, recently, people are required to cover from head to toe, right? And maybe there's a slow move to that, but now they've got segregated buses. They've got they're losing employment, right? You can say whatever you want as a foreigner, but your experience is, again, as a foreign male being there who, by some people, thought you were a local, right? Who knows if they would even view me, even if I went there and I recognize, wait a minute, let me finish. Even if they recognize me as a foreigner, would they even recognize me as a foreigner from a Western nation? Or would they recognize me as a foreigner from India? Who knows what they would recognize me as?
Yeah, because they would hear your accent and instantly go, yeah, you're a Westerner. They would instantly know you're Western. Like, if I started speaking English, which I did there, they instantly recognize me. And we're not speaking about the people that live there. I think we agree that, obviously, head coverings aren't great. We're both not Muslims, but we're talking about you going there as a person, and you're having to dispute with the fact that I said, if you go there, you'll have no issues or very few issues.
Let Miles speak.
No, they wouldn't. You're a guest in their country. You're a guest in their country. They would allow you to come there like I've done and break rules. You're a guest and they've got to show you around and they've got to be kind to you. You can Google all these worthless statistics that are backed by mega corporations that want to point to a certain points, and they have conflicting ideals and so on. But if you actually go there like I have and actually experience it for several weeks on two separate occasions, you'll come to the exact opposite conclusion. And you can't talk about the situation because all you do is look at news headlines and statistics. And goes, oh, look, this article talks about XYZ rule. It doesn't matter. You haven't been there. You're not willing to go there. You're just ignorant. You don't know the situation there.
I'm looking at what
Wait. Let's start us go.
What a foreign woman said about traveling to Afghanistan. So you still have to cover up. Woman still stopped her and asked her questions. Especially if you didn't have, she still had to travel with a man or with a male guide, right? So people would, if they weren't stopping the man and asking questions, they would be stopping her. Being married makes things easier if you're traveling in Afghanistan, right? So these are very, very, important things, and this is somebody who traveled to Afghanistan as a woman.
Did she say anything about their arcade scene, whether or not they had Street Fighter or Tekken?
That's a good question.
Well, Miles played some video games in Afghanistan, right? You played Doom.
Yeah, it was lovely. Yes, Doom in real life too. It was honestly a lovely country. It's beautiful in many ways. honestly, if you go there, you'll have very few issues. I don't care what some journalist writes about, but I've seen people walking around with no headscarves after the rule was enforced and all these other rules that were supposedly enforced. If you just explain you're a Westerner, like I was questioned many times, there's hundreds of checkpoints because of ISIS being a massive issue in certain regions. If you just, which everyone's a threat under, if you just walk around there and just explain, hey, I'm a foreigner, I'm a guest in your country, they'll go, oh, that's fine. I know you're meant to be fasting
Not
right now,
according
but
to
would
that
you like to
woman.
walk your again?
Well,
Not according to that
here's what we should do.
traveler.
Hold on. Here's what we should do. Everybody, please, everybody, hold on.
Fine.
Here's what we should do. Stardust, please send me the article. I would want to have a future stream where we bring this woman on with Lord Miles and with yourself and have her explain what exactly went on there. That I think
Sure.
would be interesting.
Make sure
Because
to ask her
otherwise,
about the article.
because otherwise we don't know. Like we have to get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But
Sure thing.
I wanted to bring this to tie all of this together. I think that at a certain point we did start to play certain characters, and I really want us to just be like steelman as much as possible what the other person says, which I think we were doing in the beginning when it came to talking about immigration. So when we were talking about like Britain and California, let's remember what we talked about earlier on about the British Empire, the Raj, and India. How we did point out that there were certain things that were going in a bad direction in India that the British Empire did end up reversing. Like, for example, the burning of the widows, the pollution of the Ganges River, things of that nature. Which is why I think that it is important to point out that there are things that can be improved in cultures. I don't think that's a bad thing to say. I guess the question is, do we know if that good of a job is being done in places like England today and California in order to do that? Because at the end of the day, we all want people to thrive. We all want people to be happy. We don't want the ship to fall apart. So if we see the British Empire doing these positive things for India, can we possibly see there being a negative effect of these things not being done when you have people who would come from areas, who are in the third world, coming into places like India, and then saying, "Well, we're not really gonna criticize their culture. We're not gonna do anything, and it's just naturally going to be a nice, beautiful, multicultural environment." Because that, at least according to what I got from this whole conversation, goes in contrast with something that I think all four of us, I don't know about Mass Bastard, but all three of us at least agreed on when it came to good things that the British Empire ended up doing for India. So I know I said a mouthful here, but maybe we can come together here as far as there do need to be certain improvements in cultures that
let's
come
let
in.
the world slide back into pure degeneracy. Let it destroy itself. It's the nature. It's the course of nature. All things break, all things destroy, all things decay. Eventually, the sun's going to expand, and the world will be consumed in a hellish fire. It's several million years away, and nobody cares. Nobody wants to talk about the real issue.
What's the real issue?
The sun expanding.
Sounds like atheism.
The sun expanding.
That's right. The sun's going to expand and kill us all in a hellish fire.
No,
all of humanity, all of Earth. It's all gone.
All becomes one when the sun comes to Earth.
Yes,
like from that
forward to that day.
From that Tim and Eric sketch, yeah. But in all seriousness, this is Stardust. I don't know, since you were, at least from what I got, kind of on the same page with Miles and myself when we were talking about these kind of improvements, you could kind of see Miles's arguments about California, about England, where he doesn't see these things being as applied. And I brought in certain things to kind of show that being the case. And again, I'm not saying that there aren't exceptions to that rule, but overall, I think we could emphasize this kind of more culturally related education more, and as well as base immigration more on these cultural standards. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I know.
Look, I don't think I've ever gone against the fact that we should have standards, like modern day standards for certain things, despite whatever culture somebody's coming from, right? And I've never been against assimilation, right? But I think that immigrants in America, America's done an excellent job of assimilating people within our country. We don't have the very fact that people are spread amongst each other and kind of forced to socialize with each other forces a lot of this assimilation. The fact that, you know, there is this process of even becoming a citizen, learning all this history about America that even the average citizen who's born here doesn't even know, right? Is also a huge thing that helps people kind of assimilate into this country. I don't know how many people I've talked to in the United States who were born and raised in the United States and still don't know how the government works or how the government is structured. It's ridiculous to me. So I don't think that this is I don't think being an immigrant is a barrier to being an American. I think if you are an immigrant and you choose to assimilate to America, and I think a lot of people do, because they come to America because they want to prosper. This is the place where if you work hard enough, you can prosper. And I think a lot of people you'll find are willing to do what they can to assimilate into American culture, and they're proud of being American as soon as they become American. They're proud of being American before they get to be American, you know? So I think that immigration can really be a strength for us, and it has been shown to be a strength for us. But if you're asking me whether I think that there are some cultural practices that are less good than others, obviously, very obviously.